Welcome to our first panel for this afternoon. This is traditional Philippine theater, the Sarsuwela, the Komedya, and the Bicol Dotok and Tanggal with Nikki, Carsi, Cruz, and Father Andrew Recepcion. For our Filipino guests, malugod ko po kayong inaanyayahan na maupo at makisali sa ating usapan ngayong hapon. And for our German guests as well, we hope that you will take your seats. There is a simultaneous translation into the German using the translation devices at the back. Please do help yourselves. For this panel, we will discuss how colonial theater forms become sites of resistance, giving communities ways to voice dissent and sustain suppressed cultural beliefs and practices. Dr. Nikki, Carsi, Cruz, and Father Andrew Recepcion show how the Sarsuwela, Komedya, the Bicol Dotok and Tanggal, rooted in spirituality and community, connect the seen and unseen. The respect for nature and the spirit world, piety and community, and ethic of sacrifice challenge today's culture of desolation, materialism, and ecological destruction. Dr. Nikki B. Carsi Cruz currently serves as the chair of the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies at the Ateneo de Manila University and as editor of Perspectives in the Arts and Humanities Asia, a journal of the School of Humanities. Her dissertation on Moro Moro Theater won the Wang Gungwu Medal and Prize for Best Thesis in the Arts and Social Sciences at the National University of Singapore, where she completed her PhD in Southeast Asian Studies under the supervision of renowned historian Reynaldo Ilieto. Her interdisciplinary research examines connections among various art forms, from vernacular literature, theater, dance, music, martial arts, and folk devotions, as well as history, politics, cultural heritage, aesthetics, peace studies, and performance studies, and spans broad periods from pre-colonial to contemporary times. Father Andrew Recepcion is a Filipino priest of the Archdiocese of Cáceres in the Philippines. He is also a missiologist and author. He has served as a professor at the Pontificio Colegio Filipino in Rome and at the Pontifical Gregorian University. Additionally, he has held positions as a professor at various seminaries and institutions and is a member of the Philippine National Missionary Council. He is known for his book, The Islands of Faith, Crossroads of Mission, which won the National Book Award. We will have our panelists present, and then we will have a space for question and answers after.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk about two forms of theater that came from a traditional background but are still very alive today. And it is very encouraging because they are very different and they retain the qualities that they have that make them different. So I'll start with my PowerPoint by reading Doreen Fernandez. She was a food writer. I just came from the other panel and they were talking about her, but she was also a theater scholar, and she was the chair of the department that I'm now the chairperson of. So I consider her an ancestor. She's young, yeah, but I consider her someone that I really look up to, and I really read her pages. So I said, in introducing my topic, I'll read her words because she explained them really well. So let me start by explaining Komedya. Next slide, please. This is a print of Komedya. I want you to take a look at this. The Komedya, there are actors on stage. The musicians are on stage. The audience is on, above, and beneath the stage. And this is how it still is up to now. And because it is like that, you can imagine that it has a certain character that is not the same as theater with a proscenium stage. The distance between audience and performer is very small. People can move in and out. Sometimes people fall because the bamboo can break. So the exciting moments of this performance may not be related to the story, but maybe related to accidents of choreography. Because when people are doing sword fights and they get excited, they might hit someone. A little kid might be on the way and people will shout, "Get him out," So this becomes, it's a different kind of theater, but you can get a sense of how it was enjoyed in villages all over in the past. So this image, though, from the 19th century matches my own experience in field work when I watch in villages in the Philippines. So what is the Komedya? Let me read Doreen Fernandez. Next slide, please. In the book Palabas, the Komedya is, there's a paragraph here, it says, the basic plot has some variations but has the following general formula. A Christian princess falls in love with a Muslim prince, or a Muslim princess with a Christian prince. This will be opposed by their royal parents for various possible reasons, aside from the obvious one of religion. War is declared between the two camps for this reason or other reason. And then there would be armed warriors and cavaliers haranguing each other in battle and in verse and meeting in single combat. That is the favorite part, and that will be repeated over and over. For this kingdom, and then the next hour, it's that kingdom. And then tomorrow, another kingdom. If you're a rich town, you will show 8 kingdoms. And if you're a poor town, you will only show 2 kingdoms. So the length is variable depending on the budget and the projection of funding. And so they will do this over and over with great joy. And people who are waiting for the story to move forward will have a very frustrating time. But if you enjoy it as a dance drama, and you know that people are watching it the way you watch sports, imagine an Olympic event where the same routine, whether it's gymnastics or skating, is repeated over and over, then you'd say, hey, they're repeating the same thing over and over. It's also like this. They want to see who performs it the best. And there's virtuosity in the way they gauge the movement and the recitation of the dialogue. So often, victories and miracles persuade the non-Christians to be baptized as Christians, and thus the loves are able to culminate in messages. So because of this storyline, many people consider this a form of theater that is very colonial, pro-Spanish, pro-Catholicism, anti-Muslim, and promotes lack of critical thinking because it follows this kind of storyline. So I will show today how that interpretation looks correct only from a surface. But if you ask people what they think, what they feel, what they value, what it means to them, that storyline does not hold true. So let me show you the next slide. The pattern for the Komedya, and it's called different names in different places. They have it in Cebu as Linambay, Coraldal in Pampanga, Hadi-Hadi in Leyte, Moro-Moro. In many places they have different names, but the underlying logic remains the same. There's verses, so it's recited in poetic verse, 12-syllable lines in quatrains, and they are able to fill 3 to 5 hours for 7 up to 30 days. Okay, and so like the fellow Asians, the Japanese, Chinese, Indonesians, the Filipinos' sense of time for drama is definitely not Western. The pace is leisurely, the enjoyment is unhurried, and repetition is a distributive logic so that if you left to cook, wash your clothes, if you come back, then you can catch up because it's probably just a repetition anyway. 30 days is status. It means you had the power and wherewithal to present for 30 days. It shows the health of the civic body. So the next slide, this now is the Sarsuwela, which is so different from the Moro-Moro. The Sarsuwela, I'll compare the two, Sarsuwela and Komedya, sorry. Sarsuwela is tighter in construction. It's not 30 days, not 7 to 30 days. It's your usual typical musical. So let's see how this was described by Doreen Fernandez. Next slide, please. So in the same book, she describes Sarsuwela as the first professional Philippine theater Actors and actresses earned their living for performing in Sarsuelas. Authors and composers were creators. It's like there's a famous theater, and there's craftsmen, costume makers, musicians. So it's closer to what we know theater to be. And its music and dances and party scenes appealed to music-loving Filipinos. And you can see that the same ingredients in the Sarsuela can be seen in movies that we enjoy now. And the stories were not about the Moros or Cristianos of the Komedya, not about some biblical characters of Catholic drama or religious drama, but about men and women recognizable and identifiable with oneself. So this is the start of realist theater. So next slide, please. The one-act Sarsuelas consisted of vignettes about husbands at cockfights who lose all their money, wives who play this kind of game, their kind of gambling, widows and widowers planning marriage and hiding this from their respective offspring, possessive fathers guarding precious daughters, disobedient sons, all the little frictions reflective of Filipino family concerns. Now, the songs are well composed. They functioned as part of the dialogue and served as exposition of mood, situation, feelings. And as in opera, which was beginning to be staged in Manila, there was also solos, duets, trios, and chorus. So you can already tell that the Sarsuela seems more intelligent than the Komedya. It is crafted with greater care. So many people say that Sarsuela is where resistance to American rule was performed through patriotic costumes, patriotic words, patriotic songs. So now let me compare the two. And my paper now is about, next slide please, comparing the two as sites of resistance, two different kinds of resistance. So Nick Chongson is currently a faculty also and a graduate of my department. So I have been picking books and authors from my own department. He wrote a Sarsuela. And so this is a script with notes and a score for piano and voice, okay? So it can be played and performed and staged. And this is a research of the Komedya of a town, two towns, one in Iligan and one in Nueva Ecija. So let's compare the two. Next slide, please. The big difference between the two is in their motivation. The Sarsuela aims to be effective. It aims to have an emotional or artistic impact on the audience. Its aim is to make you feel angry, to make you feel sad, to make you love your country or hate your oppressor. So it's very clearly patriotic, and the goal is to get the audience to respond. So, you know, that's the Sarsuela. But the village Komedya is believed to be efficacious. What does that mean? How is that different? That the Komedya has an inherent power or capacity to produce the desired effect, whether or not it was witnessed by an audience. What does that mean? It is performed as a devotion, an act of devotion. It is believed that the community will benefit from a patron saint if they perform this act, whether people watch it or not. And there is an ethic of sacrifice, you know, because the people are doing it not to be seen. So even if there is no audience, I have seen a performance in the middle of a rice field, heat of the sun, 6 hours. I've run out of tape. I tried to record it. After a while, I just gave up because it's just a repetition and all that. And when I interviewed them, I said, why are you doing this? And then they're saying, yeah, we want to perform the whole script. The goal is to perform the whole script because it's an offering. And I said, don't you feel bad? Nobody is watching you. And they were saying, oh, no, everybody's going to come when the sun is setting. So they gain their integrity as performers from performing it from morning until afternoon. And that gives them the power to release the potency of that performance because it is an act of devotion. And then at 5 o'clock, people start coming because the sun is coming down and the whole village shows up. They know they've been performing all day. And so there's that inner conversation in the community about what's being done. So let's go to the next slide. There's also a difference in aesthetics. In the Sarsuela, it's a coherent plot. tight construction, evocative lyrics and music. It is completed at one sitting down, and you see the full agenda of the artist, the writer, or the director in making you see the argument that they are trying to make you feel. But in the Village Komedya, the plot is just an excuse to get together. There is no allegiance to the storytelling. They could cut it short when the sun comes down, which means the idea that conversion is the goal does not really happen in real life. If the script is long, but the food is ready, they won't finish the performance because it's time to eat. And it's okay because they already did the hard work all day. So the story is not the point. And the climax really is not the baptism. It can be forgotten. And then there's stylized acting. It is repetitious. There's lengthy dance and dialogue. But repetition is relished. People are not bored with the repetition. The length is equated to value because it is an offering, but also the endurance and the consistency. If a person is able to keep reciting the lines with the right phrasing for 5 hours, that person is an expert. And so next slide. For my next slide, how now do I see the two as forms of resistance? For the Sarsuwela, it was a vehicle for political critique, and it was a venue for voicing dissent through the plot, the dialogue, the lyrics, the costume, the patriotic symbols and songs, the coordination of a woman in red, one in blue, one in white. They choreograph together so that they will form the Philippine flag. The props are unfurled. There are many moments of patriotic expression that you can take a photo of and say that is resistance, and you can quote us or sing a song. And many of the songs that were created for the Sarsuwela became anthems for anti-colonial sentiment. But the Village Komedya, often thought of as a tool of the colonizers, how can that be viewed as a source of resistance? Well, I believe that suppressed cultural beliefs and practices found expression in the Komedya because of its length. Doing it for 30 days, the priest won't watch for 30 days. But why was it 30 days? Because it gave a pretext. At night, there would be lamps. And in the dark, that's when people will meet to do what it is that they need to do. It's how you circumvent censorship. It's how people who were not allowed to use weapons can practice in front of the priest and authorities in the middle of the plaza, the art of arnis. So in the martial arts history field, this type of theater is mentioned positively as the way by which our martial arts was preserved. Because through constant rehearsal, and that's why they lengthened all the dance fighting, they lengthened all the performance, because it gave space to meet, to plan, and many of our revolutionaries were in fact actors. So it's a way of complying on the outside, attending an event looking like you are not resisting, when in reality, your agenda, your objectives, and what you make out of it is really an act of resistance and not surrendering your aesthetics, your beliefs, or your arts. Also, there is a jester who always performs out of script, who always extemporaneously pokes fun at the authorities. So in some way, there is also space for political critique through expressions, verbal expressions, done by very witty people through humor. And it's almost like an ongoing insider's joke. So let me end with this. Next slide, please. Currently, many theater groups in the Philippines are producing musicals in the tradition of the Sarsuwela, and they are using it for patriotic themes to address the country's problems that we are facing today. And so they are reviving it, and there are people watching and giving good reviews, and it follows, the sentiments and the structuring of the old Sarsuwela. Next slide, please. There is also a resurgence of the Komedya. Why? It never went away, but it's not a very pretty Instagrammable form of expression because it's small or gaudy. There are many ways to explain it, but during the pandemic, students were required to make their own videos to copy traditional forms of theater. And because of this, many people started uploading or re-uploading or uploading, or old videos started to get views. So during the pandemic, when I was researching this before the pandemic, I had a very difficult time finding videos. During the pandemic, I had a very difficult time keeping up with so many videos. It's like an explosion. I found so many new villages where videos started showing up. And then not after that, the people tried to learn and then video themselves copying. So you will see two kinds of videos now. The authentic expressions that are being shown, or the type that copies them, and they're not authentic, but at the same time, it's an effort to connect with an old style. And so this is my last slide. There are many forms of resistance. It's not only the Sarsuwela, which is in our textbooks, the official form of resistance. There are also forms of theater that allow us to keep who we are, even if it looks like it is a colonial form. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's in continuity with what Professor Nikki shared with us. We'll go to Bicol region in the Philippines, in the southeast of Manila, where faith and art, myth and ritual, the visible and the invisible continue to dance together in two extraordinary religious dramas, Komedya, the Dotok and the Tanggal. Has anyone here been to the Bicol region? Yes. And Bicolanos? We have Bicolanos here? Yeah, of course, we have a few. Okay. Now, I should say that these Komedyas, Dotok and Tanggal, are living traditions that reveal a theater of meaning, a space where life itself becomes performance, where humanity rehearses eternity, and where the stage bridges the seen and the unseen. Next slide, please. So we shall try to explore the relationship between, in these Komedias, which is localized in the Bicol region, exploring the visible and the invisible harmony in the context of religious dramas, and specifically in the form of Komedya. I should say, next slide please, we start with Dotok. But before talking specifically about Dotok, I should say that every culture searches for meaning in the tension between what is visible and what is hidden. And for us Bicolanos, that search unfolds not only in books or ideas, but in ritual dramas, in songs, movements, and sacred performance. So in the Filipino worldview, reality is relational and porous. The physical and spiritual realms do not stand apart. Rather, they interpenetrate. The wind, for example, carries whispers of the divine. The river remembers prayer. And the human body itself becomes a vessel of grace. So in this sense, the Komedya or religious dramas are not mere representations. We can say a religious drama is a mediation. It makes the visible the invisible. It gives form to faith, allowing eternity to appear, if only for a moment, on the earthly stage. So I should start with the Dotok. Dotok is a journey as prayer. And when I was a child, I used to participate in the Dotok not as a performer, but as an indirect performer, because I was part of the whole thing. I was watching, but I was also praying. I could even memorize the music of the instrumentalists and also some of the prayer recited by the performers. Now, the word dotok is from the Spanish dotación, offering or endowment. You offer something. So the dotok narrates a pilgrim's journey to the Holy Cross or to the Virgin Mary. In my hometown in Nabua, the pre-colonial people had a kind of a dance for, we call it fertility dance or harvest dance. So the young girls, called virgins, would dance when there's full moon to ask for a good harvest. When the Spaniards came, everything was labeled as kind of superstition. But for us, in the pre-colonial period, nothing was superstition because there was one reality, interconnectedness of reality. But what they did is quite significant because the Spaniards replaced the moon with a cross. And the young girls started to dance as Christians in search of the Holy Cross. So one of the expressions of Dotok as a journey of prayer is this, a dance in search of the Holy Cross. And usually, Dotok is performed in the open air or in front of chapels. So I remember when I was growing up, I used to participate in Dotok and I would enjoy roasted peanuts while watching the Dotok because they were selling roasted peanuts during the performance. And I would love to be there. I would ask my mom for a few coins so that I could buy peanuts. So it was not forbidden to eat while everyone was performing the Dotok. And the singers or the performers were dressed as hermanos or hermanas, bearing flowers and candles, moving in rhythmic positions. So they would move one step, and then sometimes they would move backward, and then they would move this way or that way. So everyone is in kind of a performance in harmony. But I think the Dotok is more than an art. It is sacred choreography. The performers enact the tension between the visible path and the invisible goal. Each step, each verse is both movement and metaphor, a ritual walk toward transcendence. So, for example, in the chapel, you have like areas where the performers had to stop and they would go around like a makeup altar. And that kind of circular procession echoes the human search for completion. Its repetitive chanting mirrors the heartbeat of prayer. So I can show you in the next slide, please. So you see, the performers, they're dressed as hermanos and hermanas. You always have the cross here as the goal because they are in search of the cross adorned with flowers. And they have been updating the performance. It used to be for women only, but now they have men who can also be performers of the Dotok. So it is done for 9 days, rain or shine. And I should say that, speaking about resistance, during the martial law in 1972, in my village, in my barangay in the Philippines called Santo Domingo, in the town of Nabua in the Philippines, we were allowed to have Dotok even if there was a curfew because it was martial law. Usually at 6 p.m. nobody could go out of the house. But the authorities respected this traditional form of prayer during the celebration. So for 9 days, people could go out without being put in jail by the authorities. So it's a kind of resistance, this Dotok. We were allowed to perform the prayer of Dotok. So in the Dotok, art becomes a bridge of devotion. The melody opens a passage where human longing and divine grace meet. And as the final hymn rises to the night, or to the night sky, the village stands at the threshold between heaven and earth, a community united in rhythm, faith, and beauty. Let's go to Tanggal. Next slide, please. The Tanggal is a reenactment of the passion, death, and resurrection of the Lord. I should say the rhythm. In Germany, we have a similar theater form, opera. How do you say that? Opera Mergau? Yeah. 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 It is done not every year, but every 10 years. But in the Philippines, we do it every Holy Week, especially in my town, in my province, in Bicol. If the Dotok celebrates pilgrimage and offering, the Tanggal enters the shadowed mystery of loss and renewal. So Tanggal means taking down. It is a local dramatization of the deposition of Christ from the cross performed during Good Friday in various Bicol towns. It dramatizes the tangay, or taking away of Christ's body, the moment when the visible symbol of divine love transcends into the silence of death. Yet in this act of sorrow, the Bicolano does not see tragedy but transformation. The Tanggal reveals the paradox of faith that in the very absence of light, divine presence remains. Next slide, please. So these are some of the scenes. And when I was a child, I'm excited to participate in the church to see the Tanggal. Everyone becomes part of the Tanggal. And sometimes there was this incident when somebody, because when Jesus dies, they lower his head. So it's like he bows to symbolize that he is dead, Jesus. But one of the guys stepped on the rope and Jesus went back to life like this. So everyone was scared because they thought Jesus was already dead and soon he was again alive. But in this kind of situation, as Nikki was saying, everyone is part of the whole thing there. And there's no script, no director. It's just the ritual of prayer together as a community. So the gestures are deliberate here. As you see some of the images, they're not very clear. But for example, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus lower the image of the crucified Christ, carefully wrap it in linen, and lay it on Mary's lap. In that tableau, the audience beholds both grief and glory, the human and the eternal meeting in silence. Now, talking about aesthetic, in Bicol's aesthetic sense, this is Teatro del Alma, the theater of the soul. The Tanggal unites what theology calls the kenotic and the glorified, the humility of suffering and the radiance of divine mercy. Thus the drama becomes a visible prayer, a lamentation turned into sacrament, a ritual bridge between death and resurrection. So, next slide, please. let's wrap up. I should say that both Dotok and Tanggal express a spirituality that sees life itself as performance before the divine, not as pretense, but as participation. The world is God's stage, and every human gesture becomes meaningful when offered in faith. So in the Filipino imagination, there is no hard boundary between art and prayer. The rhythm of song, the flow of movement, the turning of seasons, all are ways of mediating grace. So these dramas, Tanggal and Dotok, embody what I call the visible and invisible harmony. The Dotok renders the unseen journey of the soul visible through song and procession. The Tanggal renders divine compassion visible through human sorrow and ritual tenderness. So they remind us that the stage of life is not illusion but revelation, a space where eternity briefly touches time. So every poem, every novel, every drama, in some way becomes Tanggal, a taking down of heaven into human language, and Dotok, a pilgrimage towards meaning. The Bicol religious drama, Dotok and Tanggal, thus mirrors the human condition. We are all performers in a grand play whose author remains unseen, yet whose presence animates every scene. In this theater of meaning, the visible and the invisible embrace. Humanity meets eternity, and the ordinary becomes divine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nikki, Father Andrew. We can now turn to our audience and see if they have any questions for our panelists while we have them. Do we have any questions, Paul, from the audience? Yes, sir, over there.
In Germany, we call it in Deutsch heißt es episches Theater. Epical, maybe translation. Bert Brecht hat es gemacht, ein famous author in Germany, to participate the people, including the audience. And I think the Nobel Prize of Literatur for 2 years ago, Peter Handke, machte punishing the audience, to shout on them, including participation of them. I think, so I see connection to the Philippines, to let the people participate, to suffer, to feel embracement with the persons who are acting, not isolation of the product, what is given. I go to the Philippines even 50 years. There's a long, long time. I'm 70 now. And I was always asking myself, what happened there? What is the difference of life between Germany and the Philippines? And now I understand more. And I'm really happy to be here, to see you, so I can understand really a lot better about the Philippines. I'm married with a Filipina, I have children, I have grandchildren, and I'm proud that they have a participation of your country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take that as an opportunity to talk about a book. Fenella Canel has this book called Power and Intimacy in the Christian Philippines. Yes, and in that book, she talks about how in Bicol, suffering, the suffering Christ, is used as a means, as a source of pride. And you say, I suffered more. And then this, and I see that in my family. My family also comes from Bicol. And when my mom and her sisters are talking about an event, it soon becomes a contest on who suffered more. Like, oh, I picked him up from the airport. The traffic was so bad. Yeah, while you were in traffic, I was cleaning the house. And there were so many things. And it becomes this, but one of the arguments there that makes it something we want to think about is that instead of an entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to develop, sometimes it is a spirit of pulling down and down and down. And it also, when tied to resilience, it might make us trapped. And it's okay to be trapped in a systematically problematic structure, because the suffering is an offering. And that has a problem too. It can keep us the way we are. But the kind of theater I have is not a suffering where it captures the emotional suffering of people. This theater is an old style of theater where the facial expression is mask-like, almost blank, because the skills that is preserved is the skill of listening. There is a maestro, there is an expert who will read the script the way it was written from previous generations. They cut the phrase, they do the intonation, and the young ones are listening so that they will speak, I will follow. They will speak, I will follow. It's the expert, then the younger one, the expert, then the younger one, over and over and over for hours. And when you listen carefully, your face is blank, because I think when you watch the epic chanter who keeps chanting, you'll watch her face. It is not an expressive face because you are operating from a different side of your brain. And I think it's precious that we still know how to do that. That young ones in a world of social media, reels, and entertainment take the time to learn to listen and intone. Because I think that's precious. That is a form of language and a way of speaking Filipino or their local language. There are many languages in which this is performed. That retains the deliciousness of that language. They relish those words. So the suffering part is how long it takes under the sun, in the heat, that kind of suffering, but not the theatrical suffering of let me be a method actor and let me feel the pain, and then I will act it out and then cry. It's a very different kind of theater. Yeah. But maybe, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for the question. Back to Dotok, as a Komedya, there's a lot of participation of the people in the performance. As you see, many of the performers are not trained actors. They didn't have any background in theater art, but they are there because they have a devotion. So Nick is right that it doesn't matter if there are 2 or 3 people there during the performance, because for them it is something that they are doing. As I've said, this aesthetic from the Teatro del Alma, the theater of the soul. They are there because they have to fulfill a 9-day obligation for a particular intention. So the performance or the refinement of theater form is secondary to the performance as a devotion. But as you see, it's very genuine and authentic. They don't pretend to portray another image like actors. They are who they are before God. So sometimes some of them are out of tune, but they are singing the verses, and the guitar is not well coordinated with the voice, etc. But it's all a show. It's part of the whole thing. It's raw. No? That is the, they don't do rehearsals. The Dotok, for example, there is a written text of the prayer, but the music is handed down from one generation to the next. So it depends on who teaches the music to the next group. So there are variations now. So it would be interesting to study all the variations that we have of Dotok, but in reality, this is it. So the participation. So for example, if a child during the performance cries, that's part of the performance. So if a dog happens to be there dancing with all the other performers, that becomes a part of the Dotok. So also the ecological, the interconnectedness of things becomes part of the whole performance. And I guess on a final note on what Nikki was saying about suffering, yes, part of that is developing a kind of indigenous spirituality tempered by the Christian faith. And I think suffering, we have, generally as Filipinos, we love to embrace suffering. But in reality, we are also invited to go beyond suffering. And that's the challenge.
Thank you, Father. We have time for one last question. Yes, go ahead, po.
So thanks very much for the very inspiring talks, first of all. I was interested in the modern versions, or maybe it wasn't so clear for me if this is what is modern Philippine theater. Maybe there's also newer developments, in particular regarding the fact that maybe now with critically thinking about these questions of what influences Christian, what is maybe more authentic Philippine, and yeah, with the authentic things as I understood being sort of very submersive, still being there, maybe with a Christian layer on top. Yeah, maybe you can say something about the recent.
We have a lot of West-based modern theater, and that is why this panel tried to look for the traditional, because after being under American rule in Catholic schools, we perform Sound of Music, South Pacific, so there are we perform a lot of Broadway musicals as part of our growing up ritual in our schools. So there's a lot of Western theater, but at the same time during the pandemic, there was an explosion of many other kinds of theater. Like sometimes now condo theater, where in a condo, just a small, there would be devised readings and there would be online performances. So the theater life in the Philippines is very robust. And what we talked about is the rare, untold, unknown kind of versions that don't make it to the newspapers because they're not commercial theater. They are the theater that are only known to the local community. Like as a researcher, I don't know when they will do it. So I have to have a Facebook friend and say, when will it be? Oh, it will be next weekend. What time? I don't know. So, these are the unknown. But then I think your question was, because there's very modern, but we have a lot of rock musicals, then we can change the genre. It could be, the genre of the music will change, but the musical is inspired by Broadway, but then, Filipinized. The straight play, the devised reading is the cheaper version if you don't have a production amount. So that's what I mean by theater is so robust, because they can play around with what the production can include or not include so that the message could reach an audience. So I don't know if you have another answer, and I don't know if I answered your question.
There was just a proposal that for the Dotok, the young people, to be able to relate with it, they should do it as a rap instead of singing the verse, and probably integrate some hip-hop movements, no? So, but we haven't done it yet. So I don't know if that could be taken as a development.
So thank you very much, po. I'd like to again thank our speakers, Nikki, Carsi, Cruz, and Father Andrew Recepcion. And thank you to the audience for joining us for this wonderful first session of the afternoon.
Itong